So, Coach Chuck Barnard is a mindset mentor and resilience expert with over 30 years of experience empowering teens to overcome adversity, unlock their potential, and rise stronger after life's toughest moments. Drawing from decades as an educator, athlete, and coach, and from profound personal loss, he teaches what it truly means to live with a champion's mindset and create emotional prosperity in life and leadership. Disclaimer: any of the guidance offered by the podcast host, myself, or the podcast guests is our own guidance. We are not liable for any of the actions the podcast listener decides to do. Welcome to the show today, Chuck. Glad to have you on.
Thank you. It's an honor to be part of your show.
Absolutely. And I was just saying to Chuck, I love his background. I love the what's sticking out to me is the champion's mindset mentor and just that kind of like vibe about really empowering people. So, Chuck, I would love to know, you're helping teens, you're a coach, you've got lots of different experiences, it sounds like, but what drew you to helping teenagers in particular in your journey?
Great question. It was really kind of, well, I would say it was the guiding hand of God, right? Because when I had got out of college, I was thinking I was going to go into the Navy flight program, and then I would go to graduate school, have the Navy pay for that. And I was thinking maybe, airline pilot, potentially business. I had a degree in economics. I didn't get into the Navy flight program. And that the day I found that out was also the day I had gotten a book that my mom had reserved at the library called Unlimited Power by Tony Robbins. And I read it cover to cover, and that kind of totally changed the direction of my life. The year after I graduated from college, I went out with an express purpose to meet Tony Robbins and to learn neuro-linguistic programming and learn all this that he was teaching. And I did. By the end of that summer, I was certified in NLP. I came back. Tony wasn't much older than me. He was like 28 or something at the time. And I was like, oh, I'm going to do what Tony does. I'm going to give all these workshops. I'm going to motivate people, show them all this mindset stuff, and really help them out. Well, it wasn't quite as simple as all that, right? So I began to learn the struggles of trying to be an entrepreneur. But what I was enjoying most of that was these little workshops and things I would do with teenagers, whether it was through summer camps or sometimes I got a gig at a college or some high school sports team. And I loved doing those. Those were so much fun. They weren't paying much. And eventually I had to all right, I'm going broke here with this business. And I was working part-time and just doing all that kind of stuff. And people had always been telling me you should get into education. Like, you should get into education. They've been telling me that whole life. I came from a family of teachers. And I decided I would pursue that. And I ended up getting into a program that I didn't even apply for through a whole bunch of circumstances. And one thing led to another. And I ended up spending a 30-year career working with kids who really struggled one way or another in school. They were the outliers. I had really wealthy kids. I had really poor kids. I had very bright kids, kids who struggled academically, and everything in between. But the common denominator over all those years was really their mindset, right? They had a fixed mindset. They had the stories they told themselves about who they were and what they were possible was not supportive of being successful. And my work was to try to help them shift that. Really, ultimately was what we were all about.
I love that. And I like how you mentioned they're all different backgrounds. Some maybe had wealthier backgrounds and some like struggled a bit more, maybe came from like poorer backgrounds. It's really interesting that like everyone kind of like different categories had these like challenges. Were they all wanting to be helped, or were there some who were a bit resistant to help?
No, that's a great question, because that, in fact, I use that in some of the presentations I do with athletes and their families, because typically the athletes I work with are seeking help, right? They want to maybe get to that next level, or their parents are very supportive of it all as well. But the kids I got were always referred by the school, and the parents weren't always on board, and the kids were definitely like, what? And they would have preconceived ideas of what this class was like. In one of the districts I worked in, it was a special education program. It was a day treatment program that I actually started for from scratch. So these were the kids who had some real serious behavioral challenges. The last 18 years of my career, it was an alternative education program. But regardless, my classroom was usually kind of set off side a little bit. There was this stigma, right? So kids would make up images of what this meant to be in this program. So they were not seeking it. They weren't seeking the help. Oftentimes they were denying that they needed the help. So, we had those barriers to break down right off. And just about every year of my career, I was always, it's a 7th, 8th grade program, sometimes 6th grade. So I would usually have kids come in 7th grade and then they would repeat the 8th grade. And that was enormously beneficial in many ways. But as I got new kids coming in, 7th graders typically, sometimes 6th graders, they would already see the relationship we had with the 8th graders. And seeing that really helped accelerate the relationship building. It was enormously beneficial to have that connection with the older kids, the 8th graders, who were the older ones in the school. And they would help us sometimes use the term break in the 7th graders, right? And that was invaluable. It was really my very last year was the only year where I only had 8th graders. For whatever happened, we had 2 groups of 8th graders come in, and I just worked with like 2 different groups. And one of those group of 8th graders I'd already had as 7th graders, but there was just another group of 8th graders I didn't have as 7th graders who the powers to be said, oh, these guys really need your program this year. So I got them, and it actually made breaking away and leaving to go do my own thing a little bit easier, because I didn't have that attachment to any 7th graders that it's always kind of hard. You build that relationship with them. But yeah, it was relationship. It's so important, and getting them in a place to ready to listen to you and want to make those changes.
And if they're not ready, how can, say someone's got either a kid or maybe someone in their life who's very fixed in their own way and their own mindset, and that person's I want them to grow, I want them to be into this growth like I am. How can they go about that?
It's really, again, it's about the relationship you have, because then you can begin to kind of frame in ways where they're at, because they typically don't like where they're at, but they weren't always understanding what it would mean to try to change. So when you begin to make those connections, those relationships, you can begin to kind of have that conversation about, well, listen, you're telling me this, and this, things that you don't really want. Well, if you don't really want those, that means we need to change something. And one of the challenges to get anybody to is when those identifying labels that they have, we all bring them with us. And in the early stages of the work I would do, and you can kind of picture too, this is I'm still supposed to be teaching all the subjects. So we're trying to have conversations around subject matter, but inevitably in that, we also trying to get them to begin to identify, all right, what are these labels that you have around you as a student, around you as a middle school person, around you as a athlete, as a musician, as a son, daughter, whatever it is, because it's those labels that when they begin to start becoming part of their identity, it's going to shape how they react, how they make decisions, all those things. I always tell the story of Jimmy because he's such a classic example of what I'm talking about. And Jimmy wasn't even in my program. I was actually filling in for his teacher, and I knew of Jimmy. Jimmy had a behavioral plan. He had another adult who was with him one-on-one. He was regularly getting kicked out of classes. And it wasn't so much that he wasn't really violent. He wasn't mean. He wasn't a bully. He was just very, very good at being a pain in the butt. He was just annoying to people, and he'd get kicked out of class. So the day I'm filling in, I know I'm going to see this because I'm a new adult in the classroom. And sure enough, within the first 3 minutes, he's doing all these behaviors and it's just immediately annoying people. And the other adult who's with him, is going through this behavioral checklist and going, all right, this is not going to work. It was very clear very quickly that Jimmy's just not going to make it through this class period. So he says, all right, let's go. Well, me being who I am, I just got to go ask Jimmy a question. So I excuse myself, go right out in the hall, right after Jimmy, and I look right at him like, Jimmy, why are you such a pain in the butt to everybody? No hesitation, looking straight at me. It's because that's what I am. And I went, so how did you decide that? What do you mean? I didn't decide that. That's just who I am. So you chose to believe a lie. And then I went back in the room. See those labels that Jimmy had, and I had lots of kids like Jimmy in my own program. That label had become part of his identity. And he's not going to lose his identity. So he has to act in a way that's going to keep his identity whenever he's in a situation where that identity might be threatened or where he has to show who he is to the world. Well, in this case, he had to show me, the new adult, who he was. Well, that was being a pain in the butt. And nothing was going to change that if they were just working on the symptoms. They had to work on that core, which was the identity. So that's part of what we were about in my programs, was trying to find out what those labels were, trying to find out what really they believed who they were, and then begin sometimes a long process of interrupting that pattern over and over and over and over and reframing it and hoping that they will create a new pattern, a new identity, a new set of beliefs. And we got pretty good at it. And when we were able to do that, some dramatic results happened.
Reminds me of the Tony quote. One of our strongest needs is to be consistent with how we define ourselves. The Tony Robbins quote, it reminded me of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's enormous, and it sounds simple, and it doesn't need to be complicated. Sometimes the tools we use to try to get them to make those reframes and to rethink who they are, that can take a little bit of time. There can be lots of layers to that. But the first step's awareness, and that's not complicated. When I talk to educators and school administrators, it can be a very simple process, simple activities to just think of the roles that you play. I'm a student, I'm a son, daughter, sister, brother, athlete, musician, blah, blah, blah. You got these roles that we play. Then what are the adjectives or words that you use to define you in those roles? And then what are the words and adjectives other people might use to define you? Now you're beginning to get to the labels. And then we want to find out what the emotions are that you attach to those labels. And then we want to identify the things that you believe you are capable of or not capable of in those various roles that you have. And now we're getting to those layers of beliefs that you have. Once we have those and you can see them, awareness is the first step. And then it's going through a process of getting them to take ownership and then showing them how to go, well, I don't really like that one where I keep saying I'm stupid. That's not really a label I want to have. All right, so how do we change it? And then there's different processes for doing that.
Like it. Becoming aware, the first point, like you said with Jimmy, I'm a pain in the ass, and then reframing that and looking for a more empowering kind of identity. Amazing.
One student that is a great example too is Andy, he was one of the few kids we had as a sixth grader, and he really tried to cover up for really low self-image that was centered around academics, but it began to filter out in the other areas of his life, and he tried to cover up by being the class clown. And he was young and immature, so he had the makings of a good sense of humor, but it wasn't working. It was pushing people away. It was sometimes the behaviors were not just bizarre, but kind of dangerous. No, don't do that kind of thing, right? You could hurt yourself. But it would get laughs, sometimes nervous laughters. But at the core, where it all kind of emanated from, was this belief that he couldn't do math. And it took us a while to really break that down, because beginning of his eighth grade year, it just kind of came out finally what the issue was. And he's like, Mr. Barnard, I just can't do math. Nobody in my family's ever been able to do math. I come from a long line of math dummies. And it was like he had, in his mind, had inherited that inability to do math, and therefore he didn't own it. So I just asked him a simple question. Andy, let me ask you a question. If you inherited your house from your mom and dad, you'd own that, wouldn't you? You could sell it if you wanted to, right? Yeah. And that really cool car your dad has, if you inherited that, you could own it. You could drive it or you could sell it. You could do whatever you wanted with it, right? Because you inherited it. He goes, yeah, Andy, the same is true with beliefs. And once he made that shift in his thinking, then we could show him how to get rid of the belief. And in 1 year, Andy had gone from on standardized math tests, he tested in the bottom 10th percentile. So over 90% of his peers did better than him. And he was 3 grade levels below in math. So he's doing 5th grade math as an 8th grader. By the end of the year, he's tested 50th percentile and he was doing 8th grade level math. So in 1 year, he went up 3 grade levels, went from way below average to average on a standardized math test. And really the only difference we did was we got him to take ownership and get rid of that belief he had.
Love that. I love the analogy you used for him. Like, you could change that. You can change these are things you can change in life. I am bad at maths, and actually that identity he was identifying with and being able to switch that, really powerful. You've got you called the Champions Mindset Mentor. I'd love to know what a champion's mindset is for you.
That's interesting because, initially the kind of concept that somebody who worked with athletes and all is that idea of not just winning. It wasn't so much that, but it's how they carry themselves that lead to victory. But then, just kind of my own evolution and the more talking and even some of the research I did, it's even people who are champions of causes, right? Like a Martin Luther King or Gandhi or other people who champion a cause that changes cultures, changes world. And that word is in that context was a little bit different, but it was really came into the understanding they still have the same framework behind them. So I developed this idea of the champion's mindset arch. And I use the arch kind of on purpose because it's a beautiful structure, architecturally, engineering wise, but they last, right? An arch bridge lasts thousands of years. I mean, we still have some in existence that are thousands of years old. So it's strong, it's stable. And I began looking at whether it's a champion of a cause or a champion in life, champion athletically, what are some of those characteristics? I came to the conclusion that foundation was really, it's a leadership foundation, but it's built on the idea of love and the characteristics of love. There's patience and kindness and honor and perseverance and hopeful and trustworthiness and all these different characteristics. And it's like, you know what, that really is, that permeates every other aspect. And then built on those are those piers that hold up the shores of the arch. And those piers were faith and faithfulness. And we can't not have faith. We have faith in something or someone. The question really is what? And helping people discover that is really powerful because sometimes their worldview that they really have, the things that they really think they believe, aren't always the way they fully live their life. So at an extreme level of that are those people who be considered a hypocrite, right? That would be that far side. But there's a lot of us who have some conflicting values going on inside of us. We think we believe, but we don't always fully act that out. And helping people become aware of what they really believe is part of that kind of peer. And then faithfulness are some more character traits. And then on that, we build these mindsets around learning, around the body and health and all those things, around relationships, family, collegial, friendships. And what holds it all together is that what I refer to as the spirit of a champion. And it's hard to put into words sometimes, but it's that nature that's built on some really core values, what's really important to you in life, the things that you would really stand for, right? Like if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything, one of those sayings. So it's really trying to help people discover what those mottos are, those purpose, what you really want to achieve in your life, what you stand for, and helping put those into a framework. And that's that kind of mindset of a champion.
That strong like arch and pulling that all together. Full stuff. What you say working with like athletes and been doing that. Is there anything you've learned from like what athletes do like physically that helps with the mental side as well?
One of the things with being an athlete, right, is by the nature of being an athlete, you're taking care of your body,
Hmm.
and that has a profound impact on your mental health to begin with. But I say that with this kind of couching it in this way is that there are increasing number, particularly young athletes,
Hmm.
who are feeling a whole lot of pressure to excel athletically for lots of reasons. There are a lot of cultural changes and lots of things like that, trying to get scholarships into colleges or what have you. So there's that pressure that's a mindset related thing. Now they do have that foundation of working the body, which can help alleviate stress, but is not in and of itself enough. But they understand that connection, I think, a little bit differently between the mind and the body, athletically speaking. And they can begin to accept the idea that, yeah, like I know when I'm, in a bad mood or when I just had a fight with my girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever, like I carry that with me. So there's this they seem to have a better understanding that they are carrying it physically, but they don't necessarily understand always the connection there. And that's where I can come into play. I talk a lot about baseball because, well, one, I was a baseball guy, but there's also a lot of failure in baseball, a lot of statistics, baseball, and there are situations. So when I'm talking with like a baseball player, and they'll study it's even getting down to the high school level now here in the States. I know you guys don't have baseball over the UK, or at least not to the level we do, but um, there's a whole lot of analytics going into baseball now, and they will get video analysis and analytics on their swing and launch angle, bat speed, ball. I mean, it's crazy, like how much they can analyze this even at the high school level. And they'll pay a lot of money for all this training. And where I'm at, there's a young player with the Boston Red Sox, Rafael um, Cedeno Rafaela, and he's had 2 full years, and he's an exceptional defender, not a bad hitter. He's slightly below average hitting wise, but there are certain situations where he's really not good at hitting. Now, we got the same athlete, the same swing mechanics, but with 2 outs, he is not nearly as good as he is with 1 out. And my question is, and I bring this up with young athletes, it's like, why do you think that is? And they immediately go, something up here. I'm like, exactly. There's something going on up there with him. And that's something we could try to find out with all of you guys, right? What's different in that situation that's causing something different physically with your skill set? Because there's that mind body connection again. And inevitably, you can break it down to beliefs and all. Still, one of my poster childs for all this was a college pitcher whose coach said that this pitcher, he was pitching at a Division III college, and his coach said he's got enough talent that he could actually be competing with the Division I guys at the state's one and only Division I baseball program. And he would basically get in these pressure situations and kind of collapse. And his coach, like, I just don't know what to do. So in working with Mark, we found out kind of accidentally that he had come from a really small town. And somehow or other, when he was a young boy, he had developed this little belief that kids from small towns just won't be as good because they don't get the same opportunities.
Mm.
And he just wouldn't be able to develop as well. So now fast forward to college, and he's playing against people from away, from bigger towns, bigger cities, and unconsciously his mind's going, basically, you don't belong here. You don't belong here, right? So he would end up blowing it, right? And in his own words, he was just average. Well, when we discovered that, we showed him how to take it out. And there's a few other things I did, but basically, we did this work the winter before his junior year, and he didn't lose another game for his last 2 years, and then he got a chance to play professionally for 3 years after that. And really, the only difference was that belief was gone. We took it out of the equation.
So fascinating that that was kind of like a generalized belief. People from that kind of town like can't do this or they're limited to this, and how that was like impacting on him. Wow.
And that's actually, I'm in the state of Maine, and a number of years ago, there was a foundation started with some of the major corporations here. It was called the Aspirations Project. And the idea was that many kids in some of these rural, smaller towns stay there, not because they want to take over the family fishing business or what have you, not because that was something that they love and really wanted and aspire for, which is fantastic if that's what you really want. It's because they didn't think they were capable of anything else. And there's a subtle and important difference between those two mindsets, right? So the Aspirations Project was started to try to help kids see that they could do more, right? Don't just settle for that. That's one thing if that's what you want, it's part of your family legacy, part of what have you. You love growing up in a small rural town, and you can become a small business owner, whatever it is. That's fine if that's what you truly desire, but don't let it be that because there's no other in your own mind, no other options for you.
Do your beliefs support what you want and where you're going? I love that.
Yeah.
Now, Chuck, I know you're doing a lot of work and you've got a lot of services and resources to help people. I'd love to know, as we kind of like wrap up today, where is the best place for the listener to find you, to reach out, to get hold of more of your work? And is there maybe a final point, whether it's something we've talked about today to recap or something else you'd like to leave us with today?
Sure, thank you. Best way to reach me is CoachChuck360.com. And there there's my websites, there's YouTube channel, there's social media, you can find all my stuff right there. So that's the easiest place. And I would love to offer your listeners a free gift, and they could go to CoachChuck360.com. There's a contact me section there, so they could text me, email me. If they get me their first and last name and best email address and just put your show down, then I'll know to send them a gift. And what I'd like to send them is a little master class I have, and I'll give them the free access. I'll make it so they don't have to pay for it, but it basically takes them pretty short and simple through this process of identifying the seeds to this story, how to take ownership of it, weed out what they don't want, and then how to go through and build some habits and rituals in their life that can really sustain them and apply it all. So again, CoachChuck360.com. They can reach out to me with text me, email me, and I can get them a link so that they can access that with no charge. It's my gift to them.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Chuck. We'll put that link in the show notes below so that they can reach out and grab your free gift and mention the show and reach out to Chuck, put your name, your email, and get that amazing masterclass from Chuck. So really appreciate you coming on today, Chuck. And thank you for everything you've shared.
Thank you. It was an honor to be here, and I appreciate you giving me the time.
Absolutely. So that will all be linked once more in the show notes below for Chuck's links. You can access that and then get access to all his materials and that beautiful free gift as well. So thank you again, Chuck, for that. Appreciate it. So that concludes our episode for today. And remember to lead with your heart and not with fear.